You may have to wait 10 years. Are you willing to wait the 10 years to be in a spot of prosperity and where I'm describing as surreal? All right. Welcome to another episode of Mindset Mastery. I'm your host, AZ Araujo, and I'm sending one last reminder. And thank you for joining me today on a very special day. And had so many thoughts waking up this morning about, today being a holiday, Memorial Day, and, my obligations and how thankful I am to have these obligations, right? And we have to really think about, what the day is intended to do, is to memorialize those that gave up so much for us to have like these freedoms and these worries, to have these opportunities in front of us. And, a lot of what went through my mind is, I'm a big, like History Channel fanatic. Like I love it. I mean, if there's some time just to watch a documentary or to learn more about World War II, I'll sit there for hours and just see those types of movies or those types of documentaries. Always very just intrigued me about the courage, our troops had and the history of the U.S., right? And it's not perfect, but it's what a great place to be, right? What a great place to live. And again, it's about understanding that, these days were made possible by somebody else's sacrifices. And, it took me back to a movie that I've watched multiple times, and you've probably done the same, Saving Private Ryan. And there was one particular scene that was very gruesome. And it was actually the D-Day, right? With the day that they stormed Normandy to free Europe from Nazi Germany. And it was so graphic, and it makes you really like be in that moment, right? To really live it and to see the disaster, the carnage, just the atrocities that were being showcased. And I can only imagine being in that place, right? Where you're a soldier and you're in one of these boats and you're waiting to land on the beaches of Normandy, not knowing if you're going to make it, right? There's bullets flying all around you. And there you are. Like, I mean, what kind of thoughts are going through your mind? And they depicted that pretty good. I mean, they caught some soldiers just shaking. Their hands were shaking. Some of them were throwing up. I mean, the weather was very gloomy, very cold. It was so graphic. And, just to see soldiers that you were just talking to seconds ago, either die or get blown up. They showed a scene of one soldier holding his arm, like just delirious, or like what's going on. And, it gets me thinking about, like, they didn't have a choice. They had an obligation. They had a big picture they had to go after. And there was no choice to sleep in. There was no choice if they wanted to do it or not. And, I'm not trying to tie this into the challenges we face as entrepreneurs, but it really makes light of whatever stories we're telling ourselves. Like, this is a walk through the park, and yet we get so consumed about the short-term challenges that we don't see the bigger picture of what was actually, the opportunities that were actually provided to us. Like, we have every opportunity to create the lifestyle that we want, but we allow the thought processes, we allow our past experiences, people around us to completely destroy us. And it's almost comical when you compare. And yet we get caught up in these thoughts, like we're tied into that teenager that made that mistake or something happened to us. We're tied into that, to that marriage that destroyed your confidence, and you still carry it on 10 years later, 15 years later. It's like, was that it? Getting caught up on one specific scene of our big story, of our grand story. And that's something that, last week's lecture, Carla's lecture, reminded me of, about all these scenes in our lives, and that scene of that trauma, or that scene of that disappointment, that failure can become your story if you allow it to. But it was only designed to be a part of the bigger vision, the bigger story, but yet sometimes we get caught up on those things. It's almost like an automatic reset. Anytime we face a challenge, we're right back to that position of feeling helpless and hopeless. And what a shame. And today it's just one of those days where I just started thinking about, how people paid the ultimate price. And, we talk about the deaths of D-Day, right? Which was the biggest loss of American lives throughout the entire war was in that moment. But we don't talk about those that were, crippled, that were injured. And we're talking about, the types of guns and bombs that it's not just that you're hurt. I mean, you're losing limbs. You're losing your entire lower half of your body. And, we don't really put those into the numbers of the whole grand scheme of things, but think about the challenges they had to face. I'm sure whatever trauma they faced when they were younger are out by the wayside, right? They have no legs, they have no arm. It's like we got to be able to be in a position where we have to minimize the challenges that we're going through today, because nothing is bigger than what we've already encountered. But yet it seems like we trip ourselves up every time there is that momentum, and every time there is that opportunity to get ahead of where we were at. And this is the way I felt going into the gym this morning. I literally thought that the gym was closed because I walked up to the doors and there's not one car in the parking lot. They're usually crowded around the very front, and I didn't see any. So I walked to the doors and I'm like, oh, it's open. Only to find out there's only one other person in the gym. And it's not because, we should give ourselves that room to, celebrate a holiday or that makes me any better than the next person. But I started thinking, it's like these are the moments that we have to take advantage of, where the masses are taking their ease. And yet there's only a select few that are taking advantage of the opportunity. And what's funny is I started dissecting that because I heard something a while back. I think it was through a podcast. And they said, if you were in the stock market 10 specific days, and I think they were going back through the history of the stock market, 10 days is where most people or most corporations made the most money. Out of all the thousands of days, out of the hundreds of years the stock market has been around, during these 10 specific days, if you were still trading and had the courage to trade, to invest during that time, those were the biggest outcomes ever. Like it dwarfed anything else. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, 10 days. And then I start thinking, well, how many holidays are celebrated here in the U.S., right? Like how many days are considered paid holidays or just provided to us or given to us as these things that we celebrate, right? 10, and it comes out that it's 10 days. 10 days. And I start thinking, like, what happens if everybody else shuts down during those 10 days and you keep going? And you choose what days work best for you and your family. And you choose what days you decide to take off. Not because it's a nationally recognized holiday, which was the word I was looking for earlier, but really it's because you chose that these are the days that I'm going to take off. Like to me, today was Monday. And on Mondays, I wake up at 4 o'clock to be at the gym by 5 o'clock. I take my time, I journal, I listen to podcasts, and I'm there at 5 o'clock. So it was just like any other day. And we have to decide who's going to make those choices for us. Are we going to be the ones deciding, is this just a regular day? Or is it because the vast majority of individuals and the U.S. gave you permission to say, hey, it's one of your 10 days. It's one of your 10 paid holidays. Let's go ahead and take our ease. And for me, there was no question about it. I'm going to show up. I have obligations. Just the same obligations that you have. Your obligation is to succeed at a very high level. Your obligation is to choose what days are best for you or not. Not because the masses are doing it, but because you are committed to certain outcomes. And it really just surprises me when we start looking at the choices that we make, because guess what? I was walking with a little bit more pep in my step, like I've mentioned before, right? I was like, all right. There's this sense of confidence and certainty that ensues because you're doing things that most people won't do. Well, being in the gym at 5 o'clock in the morning, most people won't do that. But when yet you're able to even beat out those that are the most consistent, you're like, all right, I'm in a league of my own. But it's amazing what happens when you are able to do things when most won't. Because if we go back to the stock market story, those individuals or those corporations or those companies that decided to invest when most didn't, is because they have a track record of being able to do things when most won't. And I have a track record to do things when most won't. And it's all based on my history. Because anytime I succumb to the masses, to the mass thought, to the mass decision, it only made things worse. I felt helpless and hopeless. Just like I gave in to the masses about what was happening in the financial meltdown of 2007 and 8. I bought into that story. But at the moment I decided that I wanted a different story is when I got the biggest opportunities. I made more money during that time frame than I ever did in my career. And it was because I decided to flip the switch, not buy into this negativity. Not just buy into the fact that, this is one of the 10 days that are nationally recognized. Now, I understand if you planned around this for your family, that's cool. But for me, I'm not out of town. I'm here in Phoenix, right? I'm going to deliver as I normally do. Because I have that obligation. Just like those soldiers had that obligation to go fight for this country. They enlisted and they put their lives on the line. They didn't think about this. And that's the problem. Sometimes we overthink about what our obligations are or are not. And what I love is that if you continue to make those moves, when most shut down, you build this confidence. You know it's only a matter of time before bigger results come after. And it's been surreal. I got to tell you this, guys. Like, it's been surreal of how good things have been. Of course, there's always challenges. Of course, there's always obstacles that I have to overcome. But like, there is no part of me that doesn't think that I can't overcome whatever comes my way. And I mentioned it last week where I'm like, I know that something bigger comes when I'm challenged the most. And I welcome that because after every moment I've been broken, something bigger has been made aware. Like I've been made aware of something just grander. Which, what that does is just give me more conviction to go after more and more. To learn more, to be able to provide more and give more. And rise up as a leader each and every time. And when I talk about surreal, I watch my 18-year-old graduate from high school. And I'm like, how did this happen? And I had so much pride, right, just watching her and who she's growing up to be. And, and then it gets me thinking, like, just a few days before that, Carla and I went out and we bought new wedding bands. And again, and this is 10 years removed from the time where we thought the only choice was divorce. 10 years. 2013 to 2023, and here we are buying our wedding bands for our 20th year anniversary, and it's surreal. It's surreal. And I'll tell you a little bit about what this reminded me of, but that came after two years later in 2015, Carla bought me a skull ring, right? And then she got one as well. It's hard to see on this camera, but it's a skull ring. And we both wore it as our wedding bands. And, the story we had around that was like, it was the growth and the growth of our new marriage and the death of our old, right? The death of our old marriage right there. And we wore these with pride for the last 8 years, right? Just, knowing that we've grown and come so far from where our marriage was at. Did we still have problems? Absolutely. Do we still have problems today? Yeah, we don't always get along. There's some challenges that, drop us to our knees. There's some challenges that get dark. But at the moment we saw these rings, it reminded me of like a crown. It reminded me of a crown, and it's like we stepped into a kingdom now. Right? It's no longer about the death of the old, but stepping into a new level of prosperity and abundance, the kingdom. But with the kingdom comes greater responsibility. With the kingdom comes a true desire from within to continue to protect and to grow, to prosper and to look for ways to improve. And it is surreal that 10 years removed, by knowing that I have an obligation to show up when most won't, it doesn't necessarily give you the fruits right away. You may have to wait 10 years. Are you willing to wait the 10 years to be in a spot of prosperity and where I'm describing as surreal? Most won't. Most will give up at the moment that there's a challenge within their marriage. Start questioning their marriage when just before that they asked for something bigger. They prayed for something bigger. They envisioned something grander. God, give me more. But that they forget that the challenges that it's bringing to your marriage is in alignment with more. If you can't get through this, what makes you think you're going to become a $30 million producer? You can't handle the issues within your marriage. What makes you think you're going to be a $20 million producer or a $50 million producer? You can't even handle this. So you're expecting to handle this plus employees, plus all the clients and their problems and the obstacles that come along with it? You have no chance. But we don't correlate those things, that we're being conditioned, we're being forged to be able to handle the bigger problems that are ahead of you. Because who I am today will not be able to handle the obstacles that are coming my way 5 years from now. So I have to continue to grow and pour into myself, to show up when no one decides to do so. The 10 days that we're given are the 10 days I show up. So as we started looking at these things, like the challenges that are before you, is because you forgot what you requested just moments before. But yet we don't correlate the two. What that's doing is building capacity. If you can't handle this, you won't ever be able to handle this bigger responsibility. It will never align. And that's why people hit ceilings. Because they decide that it's not their obligation. That is the obligation of their spouse to make them happy. And I love what Carla said last week. It's like, we didn't save our marriage. We saved ourselves. We had an obligation to show up powerfully to ourselves. And when you invest in yourself, it's amazing what happens. You're able to provide better to others, a better version of yourself to others. But if the epitome of your happiness is based on how your husband or your wife feels, well, good luck with that. And that's where we were at. We were stuck. I, like her, thought that it was her responsibility to make me happy and vice versa. Not knowing that we had obligations to grow as individuals. And these are the obligations you have today. The obligations to be very successful in your business, not just to shut down at the moment you face a challenge, because just moments before you prayed and you dreamed of being a 20, 30, 50, whatever that number is to you. 100 million. I don't know. But the version of the person that's requesting right now does not have a chance if you can't get through the obstacles you have right now. So, yes, it's surreal. It is absolutely surreal. 10 years removed, and it's like, do you have 10 years within you? And I remember the day, I remember the dark days. I remember when Carlos started packing up and left the house. To now, like, sitting back, it's like, I can't imagine my life without her. But it was my obligation to grow. It wasn't her obligation to make me happy. Or the other way around. And those are the responsibilities. As I look at my business, it was my obligation to show up through the betrayals, through the hardships, through the financial devastations, just like I do every day, an obligation to show. Because there's bigger prices to pay. Memorial Day is celebrated for that reason. People pay the ultimate price. But my ultimate price would have been my family and not being a part of my daughter's life each and every day. So yeah, it's been surreal. And then to get a copy from my designer where my house is featured in a magazine. Yeah, it's surreal. And it's amazing to understand that this is just the beginning. Because I'm prepared. I'm prepared to fight. I'm prepared to what's coming my way. The obligations to grow is all I think about. I'm not counting on somebody else to give me permission to say, take your ease, AZ. There's a bigger responsibility. My obligation to give everything to you is something I think about every day. How to improve, how to enlighten. And hopefully something I say today can give you that pivotal point that will change the direction of your business. And I put that pressure on myself each and every day. And I think those closest around you, closest around me, will echo that very same thing. And I'm intense about it. Because I'm hoping that you're able to see how good life gets. And I know I'm just scratching the surface. I'm not telling you that I've arrived at any point. What I'm saying is I see something bigger. I feel something bigger. And my obligation is to continue to grow and to be able to give you my insights so hopefully you're able to do the same in your spheres. Because that's an obligation to grow, not to subdue, not to break down at the moment there's pressure, but to stand alone sometimes. Like I was this morning until more people started showing up. So these are the obligations we have to think about. But yeah, it's surreal. And I'm just so happy and I'm proud of that dude 10 years ago that didn't quit, that seeked out counsel, that decided to just cut everyone off that wasn't providing value, and willing to walk this path alone. And I couldn't have written this any better, and I'm excited of what the next 10 years will bring. Because if I came this far from being naive to life, because that's what I was, naive, with this newfound wisdom, with all my experience, my awareness, because of the work I put every day, I can't imagine where I'll be 10 years from today. But man, I'm looking to push the envelope. I'm willing to take on any challenge God puts in front of me because I'm requesting big things. It's not just about the vision, right? It's not just about the vision board, but understanding that with that vision comes great obstacles to overcome. And if you can't correlate the two, then you'll always be stuck. So it's an obligation for you to take advantage of the market today, of the work you need to do today, and not hold back. I'm so inspired. I'm also very thankful. I see you on the call here, Isaiah, and I love the message you sent earlier, right, to some of the groups in your coaching group. As a veteran, you're not there just celebrating, but honoring by working on yourself. And I thought that was it was amazing, and it hit deep. And for me, it's about, truly honoring those that gave us these opportunities, but honoring yourself. Like, we don't have to make it this difficult. We don't have to beat ourselves up. We don't have to make it this ugly sometimes, right? Like, these experiences, this pain was brought on to us because we desired, we prayed, we envisioned something bigger. It's all in alignment. So see it as a blessing and be thankful for that. Guys, I want to thank you for joining me for this episode of Mindset Mastery. Have a great day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye now. Thank you for joining us for this episode of Badass Agents Podcast, brought to you by AZ & Associates and Do the Work Coaching and Consulting. You can watch this and other episodes by subscribing to our channel on YouTube or by visiting us directly at badassagents.com. And of course, you can listen to this episode and many others on your preferred podcast provider.